Hey all, Alex here at your home of the Music Deep Dive, and today it is time for a review of the 2017 biography by Laura Dassow Walls, Henry David Thoreau, A Life. Laura Dassow Walls, English literature professor, started her undergraduate career at the University of Washington before continuing on to Indiana University, where she received her doctorate. She is currently teaching at the University of Notre Dame as the professor of English over there. She has written and edited a few different books regarding her specific area of interest, which is kind of this idea of American transcendentalism and the studies of a lot of these kind of early great abstract American authors like Thoreau, like Thoreau's mentor, if you will, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and folks like that. This is her first, I believe, attempt at writing a proper biography, according to the works list here, and certainly the first work of hers that I have read in general. Very interesting, but obviously a very fitting background to tackle something like this. And then Henry David Thoreau, we have talked about in the context of his work Walden, which I reviewed not too long ago. And Thoreau is one of those figures who is, he's sort of one of those names that's etched in time. When we think of the great American authors, we think of the great American thinkers from the 19th century especially, but really of any time. I think it's one of those things where some of that could be just maybe my own personal ignorance of his work. Maybe some of it speaks to how his work is taught. But I think Thoreau and Emerson as well are two figures whose influence is taken for granted a little bit, but it's not often, I think, that we are forced to confront their works unless you are in, let's say, an American literature class of some description, and if it's something that you're trying to focus on. But, I sat with Emerson's work, and I reviewed the biography by Robert Richardson on Emerson, which definitely opened him up to me. And this Thoreau biography, which admittedly it did take quite a while for me to get through, which was no fault of the actual writer herself and the actual writing in the book itself. It was more just a motivation thing. But really getting to sit with this Thoreau biography for a while really made me appreciate Thoreau the figure and Thoreau the man a lot. Arguably more so, I think this biography in a way gave me that impression more so than the Richardson biography did of Emerson. Now, I think the big maybe difference between them is Thoreau, Emerson always, I think, feels like he has a foot that is grounded in some sort of, I don't know if you want to call it cynicism or whatever the case may be, but he always feels a little bit removed. And Thoreau, throughout this entire book, I mean, you see it in Walden too. Let's not get around that. Walden is very much like Thoreau kind of revealing himself, but it's really evident in this book that this guy does not put up false fronts. He very much lives by what he thinks, and he's not afraid to share what he thinks. And that's why the totality of his work is so impressive. So I think that impressiveness too comes from not only being unafraid to share thoughts, but also just being unabashedly curious. Thoreau was very much a kind of what you would think of as an early example of a naturalist. Again, you see it in Walden, but you really get a chance to dig in this biography to some of his naturalist writings, some of his observations when he was kind of living off the grid, as it were, to use a modern expression. And I think that, especially when you put it into the context of the time, is really fascinating. Thoreau is interested in the functions of the natural world and how they compare with the functions of the human world. as we talked about in the Walden review, very much is looking for us as humans to maybe take some cues from the natural world as far as focusing more attention on just kind of living in the moment and that sort of thing. But I think you also have to take into account Thoreau's support of abolition. And you have to take that into account when he is giving these writings and talking about kind of how humans naturally are, how we've evolved from things. And I think one thing that is really fascinating is there's a bit at the end which talks about Thoreau's reaction to Charles Darwin's An Origin of Species, a book which was like a nuclear bomb going off in the late 1850s for so many reasons, but not the least of which being that book and the conclusions that it draws are so fundamentally repulsive and completely contradict one of the major arguments towards the enslaving of Black people, of Africans, African Americans. It's such a radical shift in thinking there. And you get to read Thoreau's reaction to that, and you get to see kind of how that in a way ties into some of Thoreau's own writing. I'm not saying he was doing anything like what Charles Darwin was. And yeah, it's interesting to see how this stuff all kind of interconnects, and this whole, challenging of traditional thinking that Thoreau is trying to do. I don't have a lot else to say beyond that, because I think Thoreau is just such an interesting and fascinating figure, and I think the writing here really does him service. It's very well done. It's not inaccessible. It's pretty to the point, and I think that it also takes its time. It doesn't rush through the facts like a lot of biographies do. I think it does take its time to kind of sit with scenes, to sit with events, and get a sense of like how Thoreau may have felt about them and what the reactions were and things like that. And I think that's a lovely thing. And I also love just kind of the overall contextualization of Walden, understanding the circumstances from which that book originated and how it evolved before it was published, almost a decade after the lived experience of Walden actually happened. It's all interesting. It's all really well done. It's a captivating book, and Thoreau is a captivating figure. And with the, I feel like he is a type of person where it's probably not easy to make him seem uninteresting, but I think you could very easily do his life a disservice if you approach it from the wrong angle. And I think Walls does really well here as far as how she is approaching it. So I recommend this book. It's really solid. It's really, really well done. Maybe read Walden first, kind of like what I did, kind of get a sense of like where Thoreau is at, because I think just reading that one book alone will give you that sense of curiosity, that desire to want to explore more of what he wrote. And after that, the world's kind of your oyster. So very good. Highly recommend it. Check it out. With that, I want to thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more reviews are to come. Hit that bell for notifications and tell a friend as well. Thanks so much, and I will see you next time right here at your home of the Music Deep Dive.